Hello and welcome back to the second episode of PlaymakerTV. I'm Mia and I'm a women's football writer. I would call myself that, I think, if someone asked. And with me, I have Playmaker's data analyst Jesper. Jesper, how are you doing? Because that's a question everyone needs to ask before when going live or recording a podcast. So
Yeah,
spit it out.
I'm good, really. Except from I'm a bit nervous for the men's game tonight against Slovenia. Since we risk being relegated to level C, so yeah, a bit nervous, but otherwise I'm doing very well. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a do or die for Swedish men's football tonight, kind of. So, of course, I mean, but you gotta admit, it's a bit exciting as well because this is like the Nations League is, they're friendly games, but now it really matters. So,
Exactly.
yeah, so just relax and enjoy this ride with me for a moment. Because now we're going to talk about more fun stuff. Um, I mean, I think we presented this sort of format on why we're doing this the last time we recorded, but let's do it again because we are doing this to present Playmaker as a football analysis platform. It's a Swedish football analysis platform, but you can find English inside the platform, so don't worry about that. And you showed a little bit of the platform last time in this live stream. So let's just go back a little bit and do it again because you can find lots of interesting information in the platform Playmaker when you analyze games and players and scouting players and stuff like that. So let's just jump into the platform straight away and look at the Everton game from this weekend because that was a brilliant football game, right?
Yeah, that was a brilliant game. Very nice to watch, and yeah, we all love a derby and the Merseyside atmosphere. So fantastic, especially with some Swedes in the game as well.
Yeah, I was a little bit irritated at first because the environment sound from the stadium wasn't in the broadcasting from Viaplay at the
No.
beginning, so you couldn't get a feeling of it. But I mean, it was an intense game. I think both teams really went out there to deliver. So just for that, we'll just pick this game and show what you can find in Playmaker when you look at game stats.
Exactly. So let's go into the right season to start with, 2022, and the Liverpool-Everton game here. So yeah, to start with, we can see that there was expected goals dominance from Everton. They had 2.82 expected goals according to our model, compared to Liverpool's 1.1. There were 3 goals in the game. It could have been more, but yeah, enjoyable game to watch. If we look at the possession, there was also a dominance from Everton, 56 to 44, as well as in successful passes. And if we look at the expected threat model that we were going to talk about more later in this episode, we also see that Everton had the slight dominance, but not maybe as big or not as big as the expected goals model tells us.
Yeah, and we are quite interested in this game because we had 2 Swedes on the pitch, one that started and one that came on later to become a super sub. We can call Hanna Bennison, but let's continue to show us what Playmaker could show and deliver.
Yeah, so let's start with the pass network. So we can see that Natalie Björn had a lot of balls. She was playing in this anchor role or center defensive mid like she did in the Euros this summer, a role that fit her very well in the Euros, and we have to say in this game too. So that was very nice to see. You can see that she had a lot of connection with Sevike and Veje, and also up to Benison and out to Park and Graham. We can also go deeper into the detailed stats if we scroll up and press here. Now I hope it's not too small for you to view at home, but we can talk about it as well. So Natalie Björn had 55 passes and a very high successful passing rate. She also had 6 passes into the box in this game, which also Park had. So that was a very they were very successful in entering the danger zone with their passes, something that Natalie Björn was in the Euros as well from this role. So it's really interesting to see that development in this game in Women's Super League as well. Do you think she will continue to play there, Mia, or?
Yeah, I mean, I do know that she prefers herself to play as a center back, but after the performance she showed at Anfield, I do think that Brian Sørensen will think once and maybe twice before bringing her back to his back line. And I'm pretty curious about what is going to happen in the national team setup if she continues to play there. Because as we all know, we have a hole to fill, or a gap to fill there now when Caroline Seger is gone due to injury.
Exactly, and maybe she will fit there perfectly. I think she replaced Seger well in the Euro. So I'm excited to see what can come out of this. And we talked about Benison as well. She didn't have too many actions since she were a sub, but she had 8 of 8 completed passes, 8 passes in total. 8 were successful, and she had 1 goal, 2 shots, and 0.46 expected goals. So very nice to have a goal so early in the season. Right?
Yeah, and they looked like they enjoyed themselves. So from a Swedish perspective, we like to see that.
Exactly, and I thought we could look a little bit deeper into Everton's season as well so far. We've only had 2 games, so it's not too much, but it could still be quite nice to just see how they have performed. So if we go into Everton here, we have Natalie Björn. We are very early.
This is an early spider.
A very early spider. You shouldn't take these too seriously since they've played so little so far.
People love stats, even though it's not like totally complete. But now we are very accurate by telling you this, that this is the still very early stage in the season, and so stats and numbers and spiders will for sure change, both in shape and in numbers.
Yes, and we can also see something we can have with us when we talk about next subject is that Katrin Veje and Stenevik together with Björn and have a high expected threat so far in this season after only 2 games. And Veje and Stenevik, you saw the same when they played in Damallsvenskan. So very interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to follow players that have changed from Sweden and the Damallsvenskan into the WSL. But we are actually going to talk about one metric more than others today, and that is the XT metric that Playmaker use a lot. So Jesper, explain to everyone now, what is XT, expected threat?
Yes. So, okay. As most of you know, I think that more and more people that are following football get more familiar with expected goals. So what expected goals tells you is how likely it is that you will end up scoring from a certain position on the field, given a few circumstances or many circumstances, depending on how complex the model is. So what a guy called Caron working for Arsenal did 3-4 years ago, before he worked at Arsenal, was like looking at if you could take in more events into the data and make the model more complex. You have a lot of chances that you feel as a coach or maybe a fan watching the game that why didn't the player shoot? He got the ball inside the penalty area, and he decided to receive the ball first and maybe make a dribble and lost the ball, and there was no chance, and you don't have any expected goals for the team, for the game, and you can feel like maybe the expected goal numbers are not telling the true story about the game. But what if you could measure the likeliness of your team scoring a goal from just where you have possession during the game, how you control the game? So that's really the idea from expected threat. So, and one advantage is that like when you base a model on expected goals, that is a really good model and it's better than was used before. Shots are only about 2% of the events in a game, which you can see in this bar plot here. But passes, carries, and dribbles are around 70 to 80% of the data set for a game. So therefore, we decided to train and implement the expected threat model for Playmaker as well, since we believe it contributes to a lot of understanding the game and also evaluating players. And really what the situation is here, like when a player has the ball in a possession, you really have the decision, as I've draw here in my figure, is like you could either go for a shot, you could carry or dribble the ball, or you could decide to pass. That's really the options. Like no player really decides just to leave the ball or run away or give it to the opponent. But that's like the idea of possession.
No, sorry, but that was a bit. Yeah, I just got some pictures in my head now with players just coming on full attack and then just I just leave it here for someone else to take care of. You know.
Yeah, you never know. You never know. No, but really, that's the decisions a player has in a possession. And then the expected threat model that we have a Playmaker, I've trained on historic data, and then you look at given a specific position on the field, how likely is it that if you control and keep the possession, that the possession later in the possession chain will end up in a goal. So if you control the ball and do a successful pass further back in the field, you maybe increase the threat or the likeliness of scoring a goal less than if you do a pass into the box, or if you do a pass inside the box that is successful, or a carry dribble. So the expected threat model can give you a value based on how much you increase the likeliness of scoring a goal later in the possession chain, given that you move the ball from possession A to B, from a carry dribble or a pass.
And that is the formula, I presume.
This is the formula here, and I'm not gonna go. I love math, so I just put it here. But maybe someone watching this episode will like it as well. But really, what you have here is that you have the likeliness of shooting, like the XG model, and then you have the odds of shooting in a specific zone on the field. Like, is a player usually shooting from this zone, and is a player. And then the move transition matrix. So if you're in a zone, how likely is it that you're successfully gonna be able to move to another zone on the field?
So we have to like stop here, because everything you tell us now seems so good, and this is the formula that's gonna help all football clubs to scout good players and win games. But we all know that metrics have weaknesses. And since we want to like get people to think about that as well, so what's the weakness with XT if you use that?
Well,
you have a hard time finding a weakness now. I can see that, but it's
no, I really like expected threat. But of course, I think the most important thing, like when you're using a metric, is that you have to understand what it tells you and ask the right questions. So like we could list all the players, which we're going to do later, that has the highest expected threat, but you really need to take that into a circumstance, like which position does this player play, for which team does this player play. Maybe you should look at the share, like what kind of, like how much do this player increase the expected threat in this team, like what share of the total XT does this player have. Then in a later episode, I'm sure we're going to go into our machine learned action-based model that takes in all different actions, also the defensive one, where we also evaluate passes. And then we have even more variables and data of surrounding players and so on that could increase the model further. But what we know with expected threat is that expected threat is a very good model to evaluate passers and dribblers and carriers, like possession players that increase value to your possession, and that is really good for scouting in that sense.
Can I ask a question now? Because you said when in possession, when you have the ball. So if a team doesn't play possession-based football, does the XT perhaps comes to not as much value, or what did you just say there?
Say that again.
So you just said that the XT can like add to the value of when in possession, like when you carry the ball, when you pass the ball, or when. So
yeah.
If a team doesn't play possession-based, can that be a weakness in using XT?
I wouldn't say it's a weakness. I think it fits for all teams. Although, like, if a player has a very high XT number, but you have a very dominant team, like Barcelona, for example, then maybe it's easier for the player to receive that value. Like, the player is still good, but you maybe have to take into contrast, like when the player is replaced and other players in other roles. But then if you have a player that is, for example, have a very high XT share and is playing for a team that is not having the ball as much and is generating a lot of threat on her own, that can tell you a lot. Like, and then maybe that player fits perfectly for another team playing in another style or the same style. I don't think I used to changed side, but what I'm showing here on the slide here is actually like a averaged XT value for different zones. So this is a 16 times 10 matrix. You can make them differently precise and differently big for this kind of visualizations, but really you have the value, just as you would say that this this shot had a XG on 0.2, for example. You have a expected threat value in this zone. And then you could, for example, tell the difference from when you're making a pass or a dribble. And what is interesting with the expected threat model is really that you don't increase the likeliness of scoring a goal by controlling possession in like the first third and the central third, but when you come into the final third, the likeliness of scoring a goal increases a lot. So what I think, like, I'm not a coach, but really, like, controlling, having a high possession, if you control the possession in your own third and in central third, maybe it doesn't mean that you will have a likeliness of scoring a lot of goals. It's good to have the ball in order for the other team not to score, but maybe like controlling the ball in the final third and like having a high possession in the final third and also reaching these yellow and orange red areas, that is maybe the most important thing. And then if you do it from a high possession model or if you do it on a counter-attack based model, that is up to you and your material as a coach maybe, but that's something to think about.
Yeah, for sure. And I do think that since we actually started this with a league, the WSL and the Everton game, and when we look at players there, it's hard to like give the numbers justice, or the spiders that we also work with when we use Playmaker, because they have only played 2 league games. But in Sweden, they have played a lot more games.
Exactly.
It's only 5 rounds left, and it's quite exciting. I can tell you who is going to win, who is going to take the Champions League spots, and so on. And moving on, talking about XT, let's just look at the Damallsvenskan this season, and it's the 2022 season. I see. It's
Oh yeah.
yeah,
This is not the 2021 season. This is the 2022. Yeah.
yeah.
It's our second episode. Be kind.
Yeah, be kind to us. We do this on our spare time, sort of. So sometimes we get things wrong, but it's 2022 and XT in different areas, and like we just talked about, carries, passes, and so on. But this is what I get from this that you're showing now, Jesper, is that this is the total XT value for players, and we must say that
it's the total per 90. So like it's average per 90, and then also I've like the players that have played 800 minutes or more are included in this top list. And then I took out the top 10. So for example, Jelena Sankovic has very high XT numbers, but she only played in between 500 and 600 minutes in Damallsvenskan this season. So she's not here if someone is missing her.
No, and she's not here in Sweden also, because she's in Chelsea now, together with Johanna Rytten Kaneryd, who is also showing on this this table, and Elise Stenevik, who has moved from Eskilstuna United to Everton. So we're just gonna tell you that before Jesper is going through this list.
And then this is the total expected threat. But as we're going to see in the next pictures, the player have received this, like generated this number through maybe playing in different styles. So Alva Selerud, for example, that is on the top of the list. She can carry and dribble the ball as well. But you can see here that she's the leader when you only look at passes as well. So she's very good in, like, if you would look at her numbers, like pass into final third or pass into the box or shot assists and those numbers, she's very high up as well. The only difference here is that, like, if you're using expected assist, for example, to look at the expected, how good of a passer a player is from the shot assists, the key pass and the assists, then you miss out on the other passes further back in the chain that we get here. Also, if a player doesn't decide to shoot or does a bad decision from a good pass, or if Alva Selerud does a good second assist, hockey assist, as we say in Sweden from ice hockey, then we encounter it as well.
And it's quite interesting because these are players on these lists. It's not the same position at all, but it's a lot of fullbacks or wingbacks. I can tell you that. And Alva Selerud is playing as a wingback in Linköping. Lisa Klinga is also, she's a fullback, I think, because I do think that Vittsjö is playing with a back three. So it's just important to know that this is not like possession-based lists, because this is all about players who scores high on XT.
Yeah, and you could normalize these numbers from position. You could adjust them for possession or for total number of passes. So there's you could definitely do more with these numbers. And fullback and central midfielders, for example, or wingers are generally players that are high up in expected threat. If you talk on a general term, it can be different for different teams. But and this is also in play numbers. That's good to know. This is not throw-ins or set pieces and so on, because some players could generate very high threat from set piece, for example, which is good. Set piece is part of the game. Sometimes I think people can forget that. But if you want to look just in play, then you can remove that, and we have done that here. We can look at carries as well, and then we see a different player in the top.
I'm sure a lot of Chelsea fans will be happy about the top name here.
Yeah, and she was super dominant. She was leading this in 2021 as well, not only in 2022, as we see here. And if you look in general, over Europe's top leagues, she was one of the very best players in generating threat through carries. So I'm very sure that Chelsea, knew this, and that was why they recruited her, or partially why they recruited her. So And we have some other exciting players on this list as well.
We must mention that Lisa Bjork, she's a very young player. I think she's under 20, so
I think she's born in 2004, so she's 18, and we are covering the second tier of Swedish women's football as well, and she had very high numbers last year and was a player that we had an eye on, have very big talent, and it's also very it's impressive that she keeps generating these high numbers in a higher division, but also in a team that is fighting not to be regulated. So that is also something to take into account.
Because this is very interesting, I think, now that you mention it, because the teams that we are looking at next to the players' names here, they are, I think it's top 6, if I'm not mistaken now. But the thing is that Umeå, they are at the bottom of the table at the moment, and we are not sure that they are gonna stay up. So that's impressive to see her name up there.
Yeah, really impressive. So that's a player to look out for in the future. I'm very sure she's going to play in Europe in the future someday.
Exactly.
So should we
talk about move on?
Threat?
Yeah. Stay on the XT metric discussion, because we have seen, you have seen something, I should say, in your numbers. So let's move to Serie A in Italy, and another Swedish player who is Elin Landströms. She has played in many different clubs, but different clubs in Sweden. For example, Umeå, and she has been in BK Häcken, but that was when BK Häcken was called Kopparbergs Göteborg. And then she has played in Linköping, and last season she was in Inter. And in Inter, she had the best XT carries among fullbacks in Serie A. But now she has moved to Roma. So let's look at her. This is a player report, I should add, that Jesper is creating. And he's creating a lot of these. And this is what you can ask and buy from Playmaker if you're interested. So Jesper, what are we seeing here about Elin?
Yeah, so this is Elin's report from last year in Serie A when she played for Inter, as you see up here. And then you have her age, and then also we talked about expected threat. Elin was the 7th highest ranked player in generating threat in Serie A last year, second among fullbacks. So she was very up there in the top. And if you just look at the data grade, when we look at all actions and take those into account from our model there, she was the 5th best fullback in the league. So a really good player.
A good recruitment from Roma, we should add.
Yeah,
that we think.
Yeah, definitely. And so we have 2 of our spiders here. So we have first the spider that is based on 6 values from our machine learning model. So it's finishing. That's how good you are to generate goals from your chances. So if you're overperforming your expected threat, and if you're expected goals, and you're generating a high expected goals, then you're probably very high up here. And this is a comparison to other left backs. For Elin's sake, I think she had 2 shots in total or something last year, or she didn't have many, so that's why she is low. Then you have headers, how successful she's in the air, passing ability, that is how it takes passes into account from many different standards, but really how you are decreasing the probability of your opponent scoring by passing further back on the pitch, and then also higher up, how you are generating chances, how much you're increasing the likeliness of your team scoring later. You have the defensive skills, looking at how you're preventing the opponent's goal from scoring. You have duels. I think it says itself. And then creativity, which is like dribbles and carries and technical performance. And then we have the position-based KPI spider, where you have 12 different KPIs. We have many more, so you could variate this one, but this is a normal template that we use for fullbacks. So you can see that she was very good in generating threat through carries. She had a very high headers and tackle percent in the defense, and she was over average in not being dribbled past. So it was hard for wingers and attackers in other teams to dribble past her last season. And she was over average in most of these KPIs, also in shot assists and expected threat through passes. And if we look at the expected threat numbers here further down, we can see that she in expected threat carries per 90, she was top of all fullbacks. There was no other fullback that was having a higher number than her. Her number was 0.11 or 10.8 something. So you can take that into account to Ritin Conrad's 0.19. That was very high. And then expected threat passes, she was fullback number 4. So very high up there as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting to see it like this as well.
Yeah, I really like the swarm plot. Like you have she's the red one here, and you can see all the other fullbacks in white here, and then you can see like if a player is very dominant, because if you have in a spider, you can see that player is top 5% or is very good compared to others. But here you can see the dominance, or like how the players are compared to the others, like what is the normal value and how is the distribution looking. So if you look at headers percent, you see she's number 3, but there's a lot of players like up there, 5-6 players up there in the front that are very close. Tackles percent, she's number 4. Carries into the box, she also has a pretty good number, but you look here, she's in the middle, but it's only really 5 that are ahead of her, and 15 or something, 15, 20 that are behind her. But so it looks like she's in the middle, but if you compare it to other players, she's in the top or top. She's number 6, but she's just leading the bigger the bigger hive of players here. And in final third entries per 90, she was also number 3. So in all offensive numbers from passes and carries, she was really dominant. And I thought we can look at these actions a little bit more in some plots on maps here. And we have her defensive actions up here. I think maybe it's hard for you to see the percentages, but you know from previous plots that she was very high in tackle and dual percentage, also in interceptions. Then maybe if you compare the amount, she had a pretty high amount, but if you compare to other players, there were players that had more defensive duels than her. But you see here also that it's more green than red, really.
So what's the green and red?
The
explain
green,
the difference.
Yeah, good. The green is the successful defensive actions, the successful duels, tackles, air duels, also successful interceptions. And to some, like a successful interception in Playmakers like evaluation is that if you do an interception and then you make sure that your team keeps possession. Like sometimes in football you have interceptions, but really after the interception, you lose the ball in a tackle, or you do an inaccurate pass or something, so the possession is not controlled. So a successful interception is that you recover the possession from the opponent team. You have also, like if you would look at this more closely, you could it would be easier to see like the triangles and squares and circles, like indicating the different kind of actions.
Yeah, okay.
Then you have her shot assists, and you can see that she was attacking from the left, which is not that surprisingly, given her position. And she had 2 assists last season and an expected assist of 1.8. So she had the assists that were expected of her, really. And from this expected assist model also, that's like if you get an assist, that's really up to your teammate, right? Like are they scoring or not?
Yeah.
And then they had 7 shot assists. if we look at expected threat here in the bottom left, you can see in yellow, you can see the passes, and in blue, you can see the carries. So there's mostly, and when I say high, like high is defined by me in this case, it's defined as if you increase the likeliness of scoring a goal with more than 2%. And 2% is maybe hard to take into account, but most of the actions are around 0. They are occurring like further down the pitch, or they're not as long balls. So these are really passes that are making more of a difference. And some of these, like a very high number, for example, could be like between 0.2 and 0.3, like 20 to 30%. But that's very rare. But you have these kind of passes and carries as well, especially passes. And that's just because you can pass the ball longer or faster than you can carry and dribble the ball. And we also have this received plot here. And then I have all her positive receptions. So like when she has received the ball from a teammate, the yellow is passes from her teammates. Most of them are coming from the center of the pitch, from a center back or a center mid out on the left flank. She also has some actions here on the right. That could be that she's just switched side during the game, like after a corner, or just that their coach had ordered her to do so. Or if she, I don't know that, to be honest, but maybe she played like 1 or 2 games as a right back last season due to injury or something, then that can also show up here. And the size of the bubble is like how high of expected threat value she has received. So a player that has, if you would sum expected threat received per game, Elin Landströms that plays further back has maybe not the highest values because she's usually receiving passes further back and then carrying it offensively. But if you have a target player or a player that is running routes and receiving through balls, they are usually having like very high expected threat numbers received per game, higher than passes. An example of a player could be Stina Blackstenius in Arsenal Sweden that has she's very good in receiving the ball in dangerous areas.
Yeah, and with this, we just like to tell people that watch Elin play in Roma this season. And it just so happens that Roma is playing in the Champions League, and the Champions League is it's also an exciting week because this week we are gonna know what teams are gonna be in the group stage for this season's tournament. And I know that you have been going back in time, not that far, just till previous season, to compare the teams that played in the Champions League last season. And I do think that this is interesting to see.
Yes. I did a mistake there first.
You're not allowed to do mistakes, Jesper. That's bad.
Yeah. So let's see here. Okay.
So explain to us now, why did Lyon win?
Yeah, so why did Lyon win? Yeah, I haven't looked at the final itself, but like what made Lyon a successful team? You may maybe remember this spider from the previous episode when we compared team spiders of Arsenal and Chelsea, right? And exactly. Then here, if you compare Barcelona and Lyon in Champions League, and I thought we picked Champions League since Champions League is a more even league, and the best teams in Europe are really facing each other. Both teams are very dominant in their own leagues, especially Barcelona. But if you compare them here, you can see that Lyon had the best defense in Champions League. Like they really had a very good or very low expected goals against. They didn't allow many chances, which made them very successful. And also, I think they had a positive, they had a positive radio like from goalkeeping as well. Like they had a good shot stopping. And then when we come to ball recoveries, Lyon was also a bit better in recovering the ball. Otherwise, Barcelona was the most, that we will see later, the most dominant team in Champions League. If you take out these team KPIs and look at them, like they were very dominant. But you don't need to be the best at all KPIs to win. Maybe that's the best way to like securely win. If you can do that over a long time, that is like maybe the most secure way in creating a winning team. but necessarily you don't. It could be enough just to be the best in some.
Yeah, and you know, this is because I thought about it when you showed the spider last time we did this, comparing Arsenal and Chelsea, because of the fact that Chelsea were very good at what they were good at and how they played. Perhaps
Yeah.
like in this, like if you play Barcelona, you have to be really good at defending, which Lyon was, apparently.
Yeah, and when we look at this, I've summed some stats for all teams in Champions League, all the 16 from last year, and now we're focusing on Barcelona and Lyon. But if you look at Chelsea's positions, I think some Chelsea fans could be excited for the next season, since they look that they've performed better than their results in the tournament.
Yeah.
But really, Barcelona was so dominant in possession. Like now they had very high numbers in group stage, but they kept that during the entire tournament, and they are like them and Chelsea are really like the dominant teams in possession. Lyon are further down on 7th position here, and that's really because like later on in the tournament they didn't have the higher, like maybe had the highest amount of possession in the games compared to when they met teams that were performing worse in the beginning.
Yeah.
But Barcelona kept being that dominant through the entire tournament.
Yeah, they like to play football with the football. We know
Yeah,
that.
really, that's their philosophy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you look at the expected goals, Barcelona, I think that's interesting because not all teams with high possession are necessarily good in generating chances. There's actually a stronger correlation from high possession in not conceding any goals, because if you owe the ball all the time, the opponent team can't score. But sometimes for possession teams, they are attacking against very established defense. So it's like harder to find the empty spaces and to generate chances. But Barcelona is a great example of like having high possession and also being very dominant in generating space and generating threat when attacking against an established and defense information.
Yeah, like from this, it seems that there are teams in the like sort of top 5 that, I mean, Real Madrid, they played against Barcelona in the quarterfinals, so that, but if you look at Juventus who reached the quarterfinal, and then you look at Chelsea who didn't, yeah, it's interesting to see this.
Yeah, and I mean, a high expected goals is it's good, but it doesn't matter much if you have a higher expected goal against, that your opponent is
exactly
generating more chances. And
if look at what I did there. You
yeah,
saw what I did. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw what you did. So if we look at to the left instead, we are not going to look at Servette and Breda Blick here, but Lyon had, like as I told you, maybe the best defense. Like they allowed 0.57 expected goals against per game. So if they kept this number, they really conceded a goal every second game throughout the tournament. And if you do that, that's usually very good. Barcelona also had a very good expected goals against number, of a very low one, but in 4th position. So this is a metric like or a KPI where they're not number 1. Bayern Munich, Chelsea, and Lyon had a better defense, or they were allowing fewer chances against them.
Yeah, so Chelsea is on top of every list, but they didn't reach that far. Like, yeah, it's just interesting, to see this, and then you look at every stat and like table and stuff like this. They need the eye test, and we all know what happened in the Champions League. So.
And if you put these numbers together, you can see that Barcelona had the highest expected goal difference, like the expected goal difference in each game. And usually, like if you have a high expected goal difference or a positive expected goal difference throughout the season, it's more likely that you're going to win games.
Yeah.
And the higher the difference, the likelier it is. And you can see that Barcelona is number 1 and Lyon is number 3, and they both reached the final. So but you talked about Juventus. They also actually have a little bit negative expected goal difference here. Same
Yeah.
with Arsenal and Swedish Häcken. Maybe not as surprisingly given the opponents, but yeah.
Yeah,
So
they had a really tough group to
they had
try and
they had
survive. We know
they had
that.
and we can also look at a metric I like, that is final third directness. And final third directness is like if a team enters the final third, how often does the team enter into the box? Like how many times do they enter the box when they get into the final third, and how many times do they lose possession or are forced to go back to the central third, like they are stopping their attack temporarily. And then you could see that Chelsea had the highest like effectiveness. If you reach the box, like what's really the directness is measured here, then you need to shoot as well. And this final third directness doesn't take into account how good of a chance you generated. But if you enter the box, then you usually have a very good chance of shooting, and you usually do. So Chelsea had the highest. Lyon was number 2, and Barcelona was number 4 here as well. This is something that you could say that Lyon are very like effective, and teams that have very high final third directness, it could be different teams. They could play in different style, but if you're playing very direct offensively, then maybe you have a very good number here if you're doing a lot of counterattacks. But you have to. It's not necessarily, and I mean, good possession teams, they usually have high numbers here. But I know in Damallsvenskan, for example, in some leagues that you have teams that have very high possession, but they are really having troubles in like entering the penalty area or entering into the danger zone just around the goal. So they are not as good in this directness. Barcelona still are very good, but that's something. That's why I like this measure. Really.
Yeah, I do think that a lot of times numbers make sense, but then you see a team or a player high up all the time in every metric that is showed, and then when you know what has happened with the Champions League, then it's interesting, to take this into counter because now Champions League is going to start again, and when we talk about these metrics next year, it's going to be interesting to see how they look.
Yeah, definitely. The last two that we can talk about just in the end is like the expected goal difference from set pieces. So that's really how many chances you generate from set pieces, not penalties here. I've excluded those, but it's really what chances are generating after a corner or after a throw-in. So if you're throwing the ball directly into the box and so on. And also from different kind of free kick crosses or free kick short passes, and then you pass into the box. So and then you can see that Barcelona and Lyon were the two best teams. They were really good in they were not allowing many chances from set pieces, but they were generating a lot of chances through set pieces. So they were really good in that metric too. And then we can look at counterattacks per game, and then we can see that Lyon and Barcelona was number 2 and 3 from generating expected goals from a counterattack. So really, when you counterattack, you could define that in different ways, but really what we look at in Playmaker, it's usually like when you win the ball on your own half and you start a counterattack and it ends up in a chance. And it has to do so also in a certain time, depending on where you win the ball. We don't need to go into the exact details, but that really... so if you win the ball high up in the offensive third, for example, it's not a counterattack, it's just a high-pressure win high up in the field. Chelsea were number 1, but Barcelona and Lyon were number 2 and 3. So yeah, no surprise they both reached the final. They were really the best teams in most metrics, and we could look at more. I have 50, 60 more of these KPIs, but this was the one I picked out.
From your Greek library. Thank you very much for that. We should also mention that, like the player report that Jesper showed earlier at Elin Landströms, you can get in touch with Jesper if you are interested in knowing more about how Playmaker could help you create stuff like that. And Jesper's email I happen to have, and that's jesper@playmaker.ai. So remember that if you're interested in knowing more. But I do think that that's enough for today, Jesper, because I think we need to like sort of relax before Sweden is taking on Slovenia.
Yeah, I think so too.
So thank you for today, Jesper, and have a great evening, even if Sweden lose. Okay,
yeah.
Promise me.
Thank you. You too, Mia, and for you watching, tell your friends and subscribe. Bye.
Bye.